Good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to see you here, and I'm so glad people are moving forward so that we kind of feel a little more cozy. My name is Beth Andes. I'm a member of the congregation, and I really want to welcome everyone here today to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, in case you thought you were someplace else. I have two brief announcements. One is that the Peaceworks meeting for today has been canceled. And the other, for those of you who were at the auction last night, and I see a few faces that were there, we brought in $20,600. Yay! So are there any visitors here with us today? No? Okay, all right. Well, I wanted to remind everyone that there is a Sunday Plus after dinner today, and if you are a visitor, please identify yourself as such, and your meal is free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I forgot to check and see whether it will happen that my birthday falls on a Sunday during the remainder of my career. I think it'll probably happen one more time, but thank you. So good morning again, and welcome to you hardy souls who made it here on this cold, snowy morning. Greetings also to those who were forced to stay home and have achieved connection with our live stream. Once again, the weather has interfered with our plans for today's service, with several of our scheduled speakers and choir members unable to be with us. We will try again in 2 weeks on March 17th. It certainly doesn't feel as though spring is anywhere near. But this week begins the Christian season of Lent, another of those adapted pagan celebrations. Lent derives from the Old English word for lengthening. It is the time when the days start to grow noticeably longer and the dormancy of winter begins to lose its grip. In agricultural times, Lent was the season of greatest deprivation. The stored grain and vegetables might be used up or moldy. The smoked and salted meats from the fall butchering might have run out, and it would be tempting to kill animals before the birth season or eat the seed corn. Little was yet growing. Fish, eggs, and cheese were the handiest sources of protein. Everyone needed to eat thoughtfully and sparingly. As Christianity extended across pagan Europe and Britain, this period became associated also with the instruction of converts who would receive baptism and their first communion on Easter Sunday. Approximately 6 weeks or 40 days before that, new Christians began a time of preparation that included fasting and special learning and prayers. As these practices spread beyond the new members to believers in general, they became identified with the 40 days that Jesus was said to have spent in the wilderness preparing for his ministry. The beginning of the Lenten season is associated with Ash Wednesday, which will happen this week on March 6th. In liturgical traditions like the Catholic and Lutheran, Ash Wednesday is observed with a special worship service in which each participant is anointed with ashes and reminded that, as a mortal being, they will eventually die. Many people voluntarily restrict their diet during these 40 days, temporarily giving up indulgences like sugar caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, or meat. Others seek to renounce personal habits such as gossip, criticism, profanity, or impatience. The idea is to undertake willingly some discipline that might be a bit uncomfortable in the service of spiritual growth. Both learning and service to others often call us beyond the edges of our comfort zones, especially as we expand our awareness of suffering and unfairness in the world and try to answer the demands of justice and compassion. This week, our gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer friends and loved ones have received yet another message from the global culture that they are unworthy and unwanted. I want to say, first of all, as clearly as possible, that I reject and condemn that message of ignorant fear. Here, in this religious community, as best we all know how, you are seen, you are welcome, you are accepted, you are celebrated, you are beloved. Anything that might yet stand in the way of that wholehearted and full-throated rejoicing in your presence here, let us all make it our Lenten practice to renounce from within ourselves and among this community. Let the river of kinship and acceptance flow through each and all of us, whatever our identities may be, whatever ignorances may linger in our words or thoughts, whatever discomforts may arise from our conditioning. Let all resistance and hesitation be washed away in the tide of love. And may we find ourselves at last confident that every one of us is somebody worthy and welcome and whole. In the light of this chalice, may the human spirit lead us to a greater justice and a larger love. And now I invite us to rise as we are willing and able, and even if you might want to just cluster together a little bit more so that we can all feel encouraged to sing. And let's begin with our covenant promises to this community, and then we'll go on to our opening hymn. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Yes, there is. You can be seated. And now I invite us to join together in our antiphonal reading. These are words from my colleagues, Mark Ballatini and Barbara Peskin. And so the right will be your right over here, and the left will be your left. My left, your right over here. My right, your left. Left over there. And I'm going to ask the choir to read with the left because they kind of need the help. So we'll begin on the right side together. Often we are found in our grief and comforted, calmed by some kindness.
Brought alive again by beauty that catches us undefended.
Even when the sun is most thin and far away.
Even at the hour when the storm is at its height.
Renewal runs within us.
Love abides even beyond anger, beyond death.
We are held in an embrace, invisible but infinite, moving with all creation.
Between wholeness and fragmentation, moving always toward oneness.
Love, you are as strong as a dark blue mountain.
Love, you are as fluid as a wide silver river.
Love, you are as splendid as a clear night sky.
Love, you are as mysterious as a dark forest.
Love, you are as wise as enduring friendship.
Love, you are true power, not mere distraction.
Truth, not deceit.
Purpose, not impulse.
Now, more than tomorrow.
But tomorrow, more than yesterday.
Love, condense yourself into this moment.
Permeated in silence, joins us in community.
So that in the fire of the words to come, the promises of this hour might be sealed in peace. Let me ask if there are any children who need to be excused. I think not, so we will proceed. Love, condense yourself into this moment. Permeate the silence that joins us in community. There's a difference between the silence of privacy, the absence of conversation, the ceasing of noise, and the quietness of shared reflection held in a gathered community. The poet Ken Patton once called it that silence found in the midst of those who with us seek their hidden reckonings. The attentive quiet that invites us to contemplate larger questions is too rare in the course of our ordinary days. I invite us to be together for a few moments now in the nourishment of that wordless awareness and silent reflection. Our offering this morning goes to support the work of our partner church in Neradga Falva in Romania. The Unitarian churches in the former Czech Republic go back all the way to the 1600s. They have been witnesses to religious freedom, to theological innovation, and to their insistent premise in opposition to the Trinitarian tradition that God is one. Those churches suffered a lot of repression under the communist regimes, and they've only begun to come back to life since the end of communism there. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. There is a lot of education of a new generation of clergy, which wasn't allowed. There's a lot of need, and the support that we can send is hugely important and hugely meaningful for them to know that they are not in this alone. We've had to cut back this support from our operating budget, so I encourage you, if you can, to be generous this morning. This morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received. Now, will you join me in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. Thinking about Ash Wednesday coming up this week took me back to one of the classical poems in the literary tradition around this day by a poet who grew up as a Unitarian and wrote Ash Wednesday to honor and observe his transition to Anglicanism. So this is a Unitarian struggling with what it means to potentially become a Christian. This is section 5 of the poem. If the lost word is lost, if the spent word is spent, if the unheard, unspoken word is unspoken, unheard, still is the unspoken word, the word unheard, the word without a word, the word within the world and for the world, and the light shone in the darkness, and against the word, the unstilled world still whirled around the center of the silent word. O my people, what have I done unto thee? Where shall the word be found? Where will the word resound? Not here, there is not enough silence. Not on the sea or on the islands, not on the mainland, in the desert or the rainland. For those who walk in darkness, both in the daytime and the nighttime, the right time and the right place are not here. No place of grace. For those who avoid the face, no time to rejoice for those who walk among the noise and deny the voice. Will the veiled sister pray for those who walk in darkness, who choose thee and oppose thee, those who are torn on the horn between season and season, time and time, between hour and hour, word and word, power and power. Those who wait in the darkness. Will the veiled sister pray for children at the gate who will not go away and cannot pray? Pray for those who choose and oppose. O my people, what have I done unto thee? Will the veiled sister between the slender yew trees pray for those who offend her and are terrified and cannot surrender, and affirm before the world and deny between the rocks, in the last desert, before the last blue rocks, the desert in the garden in the desert of drought, spitting from the mouth the withered apple seed. Oh, my people.
As I'm sure you know, delegates to the General Conference in St. Louis voted to retain and reinforce policies prohibiting LGBTQ clergy and same-gender marriages. These policies and the new consequences for violating them are barbaric, shameful, and intolerable. While 66% of the delegates from North America did not support this plan, the majority of delegates from around the globe, including the Philippines and Africa, overwhelmingly did. Our long-standing mission to be a global denomination has infused the United Methodist Church with remarkable diversity and extraordinary growth for decades. Sadly, it has now exiled the centrists and progressives who represent the clear majority of United Methodists in the United States. The United Methodist Church, as we knew it, died on Tuesday. Because it is no longer a denomination for all people, St. Andrew is now a congregation without a home. Make no mistake, today St. Andrew is more fiercely committed to being a home for all people than ever before. As your pastor, let me share with you a few thoughts as we try to sift through the rubble this morning. First, my heart is especially with all of our LGBTQ members and families. Please know that I love you, I see you, and I hurt with and for you. As a father of a lesbian daughter, we share the pain and disillusionment of this outcome. You are not alone. The entire pastoral team is here for you. If you are a parent of an LGBTQ student, please be extra vigilant. Listen deeply. Create space for conversations with your child and reinforce that St. Andrew is a safe community that categorically rejects the policies of our denomination. These are tender times for us, all of us, but they are especially tender for our students who are navigating so many personal, social, and religious challenges in their lives. I am so deeply sorry that the church has only added to the already heavy burdens carried by our LGBTQ family. Second, St. Andrew will continue to practice biblical disobedience in the face of unnecessarily cruel and unjust policies. We will refuse to follow all rules or restrictions in our book of discipline regarding sexual orientation. Instead, we will follow the Holy Spirit, serve in a spirit of boundless love, and act out of Christian conscience rather than fear and conformity. As your pastor, I will be in ministry with you and for you in absolutely every way, including praying with you, worshiping with you, serving you communion, and presiding at your wedding, whether you're gay or straight.
What they say about people is also true about churches. No one is an island. What one religious community does has an impact on the perception of us all. When a Catholic priest is accused of sexual abuse, it makes everybody wonder whether their children are safe with their clergy. When one megachurch pastor asks for donations to help him buy a second private jet, it makes all givers wonder where their contributions go. When one synod silences the wisdom and refuses the leadership of women, it makes most people living in the 21st century perceive all religions as outdated artifacts. And when one denomination decides that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people are not worthy to be blessed in marriage or to stand in a pulpit and preach or bless or pray for their community, it makes all churches look like narrow-minded, unwelcoming, harmful places. The decision this week by the special session of the General Conference of the United Methodist Church to affirm and reinforce policies prohibiting GLBTQ clergy from serving churches and prohibiting all clergy from officiating at same-gender weddings is an occasion for dismay far beyond that one Christian denomination. If it were not for this ripple effect, the internal political struggles of United Methodists would be in some sense none of our business, none of anyone's business outside of that confessional covenant community. Unfortunately, the struggles within that denomination mirror the same struggles going on in our nation and around the world, and serve to reinforce the perception among our GLBTQ neighbors and loved ones that they are different, vulnerable, and in some inescapable way, less than others. And make no mistake, that perception does harm and causes pain. The only thing it defends is the anxious identity of people who are insecure in their own sexual self-awareness. And the only thing it protects is the heteronormative privilege so long inscribed in Western colonial culture. I say with perfect assurance that after 15 years since Massachusetts began issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, that weddings of gay and lesbian people have had no negative impact whatsoever upon my own marriage of more than 4 decades. It would be easy to wax self-righteous about all this from our position as Unitarian Universalists today, but that also serves no good purpose and creates pain. It is well for us to remember that we have had our own struggle with issues around sexuality and gender identity. We survived to arrive at a fairly clear consensus of acceptance now, but we lost members and leaders over these questions back in the 60s. And it was only 25 years ago that we had UUA staff doing educational interventions with search committees in order to persuade them to even consider openly gay and lesbian candidates. We are not now and have never been immune to the pressures of popular prejudice. Some courageous and determined leaders helped us to get out in front of the curve on this particular issue, and that is testimony to our good fortune as much as to our good sense or compassion. Part of what has made it simpler for our denomination to achieve and maintain consensus has been our having remained a largely North American tradition centered in the USA. While the United Methodist Church had become a truly international body with the strong presence of more traditional notions of Christianity from overseas, we UUs have almost never confronted this form of internal diversity. More recently colonized or less economically developed cultures have often been exposed to Christianity first from an evangelical missionary perspective, which does not lift up a more progressive, flexible, or developmental understanding of faith. We might have regarded this global outreach to be a virtue of the United Methodist institution, and the lack of it something of a failure in our own. In point of fact, even the less robust connection with our historically Unitarian cousins in Eastern Europe exposed us in a much milder way to this dilemma when the bishops of the Unitarian churches in Romania supported their government's recent referendum to constitutionally ban same-sex marriage. That initiative failed in the popular vote, but the bishop's decision to endorse the amendment served both to illustrate and to widen a division between the younger progressive members and clergy in our partner churches and the more conservative church power structure. The older leaders, in part, are seeking to cultivate influence and a favorable view from the secular state. But they also represent a culture of white, male, heterosexual privilege that seeks to continue its dominance. Again, it is a matter of luck that this perspective has no practical power over American UU congregations under our radically independent congregational form of governance. But that also implies that we are well defended against any demands from or accountability to the world outside our privileged nation. Is that a good thing? In this instance, perhaps. In a more general way, I'm not so sure. It is unclear what the next step for the United Methodist community will be. As I understand it, the policy decision that was voted by the delegates to the General Conference will be challenged before the denomination's Judicial Council, which has the power to decide whether that policy conforms to the body's governing constitution. If aspects of the voted policy are declared unconstitutional by the Judicial Council, then presumably a new corrected version would again be submitted for another vote. If the policy is not substantially struck down, then it seems likely that a number of American churches would leave the denomination, and many individuals would leave local congregations. This is no occasion for satisfaction in other denominations. As I said before, these kinds of proceedings reflect poorly on all churches as institutions and on religion as a whole. It is certainly true that the doors and the hearts of Unitarian Universalists in this congregation and elsewhere remain open, as they have always been, to anyone who finds their spiritual journey leading them away from their earlier church affiliations. Many of us arrived here after that kind of leave-taking, and we know a few things about welcome. But let's not imagine that we know everything. Many people have struggled to find a place here among us, even when they agree with our principles and mission statements. We can be just as cliquey and judgmental and culture-bound in our own ways as any other group. And it is a never-ending process of learning and growth to stay aware of the roadblocks to entry into this community and to be continually engaged in trying to dismantle them. But beyond this constant vigilance, I want us to think and feel carefully about our United Methodist neighbors in this very difficult moment. And I want to start by inviting you to ponder this question. What would the national organization of the UUA have to do or decide in order for you to consider yourself no longer a Unitarian Universalist? Perhaps you have not really made that connection yet, and it's not even a part of your identity. Or maybe it's so recent and tentative that you could let it go without much struggle. Possibly, having left one or more previous traditions, it would be just one more step along your journey. Some disappointment, perhaps, that the institution failed to live up to its ideals and promises, but no trauma or deep grief. But then there are those of us, like me, who grew up in this faith and have never known another religious identity, or those who found this community as a literally life-saving force and source of sustenance in our lives. Those who were married here, who dedicated and raised their children here, who mourned and celebrated the lives of their dear ones here, who have put untold thousands of hours into working and planning and imagining for the future of particular congregations and of the movement as a whole. Those who learned skills of compassion and connection, leadership and accountability, spiritual maturity, and the practices of depth and meaning here. Those who find their friends here and bring their friends here. Those for whom the stories of our heroes and our history shape the way we make choices and measure our days. For whom the songs of our church are the soundtrack of our lives. As I contemplate the question I have just proposed, it seems to me that there is nothing, no policy or pronouncement, however misguided, that could make me say, I am no longer a Unitarian Universalist. I might disagree ferociously with the direction of our various governing bodies or our leaders. I might feel deeply betrayed that the democratic process has led to the adoption of decisions I perceive as antithetical to our principles as I understand them, or dangerously mistaken. I might believe that the whole denomination has taken an incredibly wrong turn. But that would not make me believe that I was not a UU anymore. Indeed, I expect I would see myself as holding the tradition in trust until the institution and the majority should return to their senses. I can only suppose that a great many of my United Methodist colleagues and the members of their congregations are now feeling the same way. It is no act of compassion or solidarity to say to them, oh, well, never mind, just become one of us. Their Christian and specifically Methodist identity may be as precious to them as our theological diversity and UU identity is to ourselves. And they may be grief-struck and hurting, as well as angry. And this is just as true of those who identify as gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, or in other ways queer, as it is of those who do not, but want to be authentic and trustworthy allies. I personally feel a great sympathy and solidarity with those who want to stay and fight for the soul of their religious heritage, as well as for those who want to remove themselves from a space where they feel harmed and in continuing danger. That is a choice that must be made with great inner searching by each individual, discerning carefully what they are called to do by the creative love and energy of the universe and the highest common good. It is not the place of any outsider to judge that decision. I propose that there are 3 things that we can do carefully as bystanding friends to support those who are directly involved in this crisis. 1, we can hear them respectfully as they wrestle with the options that confront them personally. We do not need to have answers. We do not have answers. All we need to do is acknowledge how difficult the dilemma is and listen as they ponder what their faith requires of them. They will need to do this together with others in their own community, but they may find it helpful to explore with someone who is not also invested as they are in the outcome. This reminds me a little of the work of a Quaker clearness committee, whose only task is to ask questions of the person who is confronted with a challenging decision. Listen, inquire, and hold a space of affirming attention. And that is good spiritual practice at any time. Second, I think it becomes more important than ever for us as UUs to live out our own large consensus of celebrating diverse sexual and gender identities. To remember both that our movement did not get where we are without pain, struggle, and harm to the vulnerable, and that we are far from perfect even yet. But also to testify that in the event, nothing bad has happened to our communities, to our marriages, or to our children because of our efforts to welcome more GLBTQ people into our faith, to encourage and rejoice in openness about those identities, and to become more effective allies. Both for our supporters and for our detractors, our movement is a kind of beta test for how well that approach works. Let it be clear to the world how much it has deepened and enriched our communities, helped to heal brokenness, and made our covenant more authentic. Finally, if I were ever to believe in a God, it would have to be one with both a fine sense of timing and a sense of humor. It cannot be a cosmic accident that this week brings us to Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent, the 40 days before Easter, with its memory of the suffering and crucifixion of Jesus for the sake of his teaching of liberation and love. Ash Wednesday is all about our common humanity, the most persuasive evidence for which is our shared mortality. Remember, O human, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter how much power you have, you are but dust and ashes, and unto dust you shall return. Faith of any sort is not something you inherit or acquire by accident or stumble into. If it is real, it is something you suffer for, something that you doubt and test, something that tests you. And this is true whether your journey takes you to distant continents of belief and strange languages of myth and practice, or if you never depart from the covenant community into which you were born. Even there, your ancestors' faith alone will not suffice you. It must be renewed and achieved again in your own striving, on your own terms. Our friends in the United Methodist Communion have their Lent set before them in the challenge to reconcile their history with their vision for the future of human community, their global connections with their understanding of inclusion, their commitment to the discipline that unites them with the cry of the oppressed and the voice of their God. Whatever the outcome, that process will not be without pain and loss. Indeed, the pain and loss are already underway. As I carry them tenderly in my heart, I acknowledge that they are profoundly not alone. Every one of our covenant communities of memory and promise aspires to greater wholeness than we achieve at any finite moment. Every one of them does harm, unintended and yet complicit. Every one of us is called to bear witness to a larger love than we can practice in this mortal life. And every one of us is challenged to transformations greater than we believe we can endure. The poet Jan Richardson says, "If you find it hard to let this blessing into your heart, do not despair. That is what this journey is for. The journey of Lent, the journey of justice, the journey of life. All of them opportunities to let the blessing in, to learn to be human. For behold, O mortal, you are dust and ashes, and unto dust you shall return, every one of us, bi or trans or gay or straight, Methodist or atheist or literalist alike. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And in the meantime, as Holly Near reminds us, we are engaged in nothing less than singing for our lives. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, not the warmth of community or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our hearts and minds until we are together again. If you would enter into the wilderness, do not begin without a blessing. Do not leave without hearing who you are, beloved, named by the one who has traveled this path before you. Do not go without letting it echo in your ears. And if you find it hard to let this blessing into your heart, do not despair. That is what this journey is for. I cannot promise you that this blessing will free you from danger, from fear, from hunger or thirst, from the scorching of the sun or the fall of the night. But I can tell you that on this path there will be help. I can tell you that on this way there will be rest. I can tell you that you will know the strange graces that come to our aid only on such a road as this, that fly to meet us, bearing strength and comfort, that come alongside us for no other cause than to lean themselves toward our ear and with their curious insistence whisper our name, beloved, beloved, beloved.